Morning, Phil.
Morning. Hey, Robert.
Kay, I know you were asking about the emails, and I just sent you a response with the email addresses that you were asking for. And welcome, John Mason. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I work full time for the city, but I also take some grad classes at UVA. And Dr. Mason, last semester, I was in Lewis Nelson's class, and I worked on one of the Holsinger photos.
Great.
I produced one of the reports for your project.
Fantastic. You know, we have a PDF of all of the papers, and I can't wait to dig in and find out what you came up with.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, great, 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 great.
Yes, we are very excited to have you, John.
Thank you very much. Terrific to be here.
We'll start in just a few minutes. A few more people get on. I think Sally was the only one that we knew wasn't going to be able to make it today.
I also heard, Phil, from Richard Wilson won't be able to join, and
Okay.
Jessica won't be able to join either.
Okay. Yeah, it's public school spring break week this week, so I'm not at home either. So,
are you traveling?
Yeah, I'm
good for you.
Out of town. Okay, I guess let's.
Could you hang on for a second? My Wi-Fi is going in and out. I'm going to switch to another Wi-Fi, so I'm going to disappear for just a second.
Okay.
Okay, we'll wait for you.
Thanks. Okay, so I should be back. Can you give me the thumbs up if you can hear?
We can hear you.
Yep.
Okay.
And now that it seems like most folks are back, I'll just briefly give my introduction. Welcome to the April 2022 Historic Resources Committee virtual meeting. My name is Robert Watkins. I'm staff for the City of Charlottesville, and I'll just be managing today's meeting to make sure that it runs smoothly. For anybody who might be watching at home, the Historic Resources Committee invites public comment at the beginning of the meeting. And I'll go over the public comment policy before we get to that. But if you have any, if you wish to provide comment, you'll need to register for the Zoom meeting and log on. So you'll be able to raise your hand and give your comment. We have, I know that Jeff Werner, who is also city staff, he's currently walking back in from City Hall, so he'll be joining shortly. And I'm not sure if any other folks will be logging on a little later on.
There's a member of the public that says they're having a hard time logging on. To
Was
Zoom?
that in the chat or?
I'm not sure.
If they can't log on, they probably aren't in chat.
Yeah, well, if they can shoot me an email, Jelaine, I can try to help them.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, my email is watkinsro@charlottesville.gov. So I don't necessarily have more to add to my introduction, so I can pass things over to Phil Varner, the chair of the Historic Resources Committee. But please let me know if you have any technical issues moving forward.
Okay, I call this meeting of the Historic Resources Committee to order, our April 2022 meeting. Before we do virtual introductions, I'd like to specifically introduce Dr. John Mason, who is our newest member of the committee. He is an associate professor in the history department at UVA and co-director of the Holsinger Portrait Project, which I know a lot of people are really excited about. And he is was previously a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission, whose report we have driven the majority of our work for the last 5 or 6 years from. So we're all very excited to have you on the committee, Dr. Mason, and I'll hand it back over to Robert now to do a roll call.
Phil, you can't,
yes, if you'd like
call
to say
me
anything,
Dr.
please do.
Mason in these meetings. First, I just want to say hello, Margaret. I haven't seen Margaret since we served on the Blue Ribbon Commission together, and it's wonderful to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, and no, just Phil, I just wanted to say that if you call me Dr. Mason again in one of these meetings, I'm going to bop you in the nose.
I promise not to.
It's
Yeah.
nice to see the French horn by your head, John.
Yeah, that's partly a toy and partly a real instrument. It's
Right.
sort of in the middle there.
Well, we're excited. We're really excited to have you, John.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and call the vote. And Jenny, I'm glad that you were able to log on and got the link after all. Tom Chapman is our ex officio member from Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. Welcome. Sally Duncan is the vice chair. She's not able to join us today. Jessica Livingston is also not able to join us today. John Mason, if you can just say here.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, yeah, great. Thank you. Margaret O'Brien,
Here.
Jillian Schmidt,
Here.
Kay Slaughter. Kay is here. Dee Dee Smith. Oh, thank you. Phil Varner, our chair.
Sorry, here, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. And Jeff Werner is walking in, but he should be joining us shortly. And then finally, Richard Wilson is also a member of the committee, but he won't be able to join us today. So welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Robert. My agenda just disappeared, so give me 1 second. Okay, next up is the approval of the agenda. It's mostly our standard agenda with the discussion of the descendant engagement, the walking tour, and then a brief meeting procedure discussion at the end. Did anybody have any comments on the agenda or any additions?
I move to approve.
And could I get a second for that?
A second.
Okay, second. Okay, seconds. So would you please indicate your support for the agenda with motion or voice? Okay.
Great, thank you, everybody.
I'm going to abstain because I'm just joining.
For the agenda, it's just for this meeting, so you should participate. For the next one, which is the meeting notes, you should abstain. And I don't remember who else was here last time. I think let's see. Let's look at the. Oh, that just disappeared. Anyway, we'll assume everybody knows whether they were here or not. We're next on to the approval of the meeting notes. Did anybody have any comments from the meeting notes or any requested changes? Yes, Kay.
No,
think
I was
you're-
just gonna move them if.
Oh, okay. So Kay moves to approve the meeting notes. Could I get a second?
Second.
Okay, DD seconds. Okay, was there anybody who wasn't here who's going to abstain before we take the?
John, and I know Jenny wasn't here either.
Okay. Okay, so with that, let's see, yeah, we have 5, so that's good. Please indicate your support for the approval of the meeting notes with a indication. Okay.
Mhm.
That's
Great.
unanimous with that. Next on to public comment, and I will pass this back over to Robert.
Great, so I will just read the policy quickly. I did get an email from a member of the public who wanted to register for the meeting, Elizabeth Shalou. So I emailed her the link to the meeting. She might be trying to join shortly, so I can stall a little bit in case she does wish to provide comment. But in the meantime, the public comment policy is at the beginning of each meeting, not more than 10 minutes will be allowed for the introduction of any guests and public comments. Speakers may speak for a maximum of 2 minutes and shall begin by identifying their name and address. So if you wish to provide comment, please go to the participant tab in the Zoom page and raise your hand using the raise hand icon.
And we can also modify the agenda to push that to later if that person is able to get on.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'm not seeing either of the attendees raising their hands, so it doesn't look like we have any comment right now.
Okay, so if they do come on in the future, we can we just need somebody to make a motion to amend the agenda to include another public comment section. So I guess next up is the descendant engagement of the descendant community for the Court Square Slave Auction Block site. And I guess I'll just pass this over to Jelaine now, since I guess the main focus of the main near-term focus is on Dr. Bailey's talk next week.
Yeah, so Dr. Ann Bailey, professor of history at SUNY Binghamton, and one of the leading authorities on the auctions of enslaved peoples, is coming on Tuesday morning, on Tuesday, and she will be meeting with descendants early in the afternoon. And then at 7 p.m. She'll be giving a talk at the downtown public library in the Swanson room upstairs. And so we've been planning this with the Catherine Fay and Rebecca from Piedmont, Preservation Piedmont, and Robert, thank you very much, and coordinating all of this. So we're really looking forward to it. And we just heard just this morning from the library that I think the in-person is already has 7 registrants. And then there's also, it's a hybrid event. So it's both in person, kind of more limited capacity there at the Swanson Room. And then it's also streaming from the library's Facebook page, and I believe the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society's page as well.
And there is, in case, so the registration for the in-person event we heard this morning is filled up. 70 people have registered. So, but there is an overflow room in case people come to the library not knowing that you need to register. So at the library, there will be a separate conference room set up where you can watch it being streamed remotely.
Right.
So we're hoping that it's a great success, and it seems like it already will be.
Yeah, and it could very well be that there's some melt, quote unquote, from the registrants at 70, that there will, some folks won't show up, and there might be room still, seats in the room. Yeah, I see Dee Dee with her hand up.
Yeah, I just wondered, I registered on the JMRL website. I don't actually know whether I registered for in-person or Zoom. I'm happy to give up an in-person if I did in person. I just wondered if there's a preference that you have for who's actually physically there in terms of the sort of politics of it.
That is up to you and to demand. And yeah, if you need to clarify that, you can talk with Catherine Fay there, at the library on that, as to whether you're registered one way or the other. But yeah, it's fine. It's first come, first serve.
Okay. I'm happy to Zoom. So it's anyway.
To clear that up, there is no Zoom. So it's
Oh.
either the registration on the calendar is specifically to tell them who's coming for in-person, and then it will be recorded and live streamed on Facebook. So there's no actual interaction through the Zoom sphere on that.
Okay, well, that answers that question. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, right. So I guess if you want to interact kind of live, with our guest speaker, yeah, better come in person, or maybe we could work it out. Andrew Davenport, who's a Monticello descendant and is in charge of the Getting Word project there, is going to be moderating. And so anyway, he'll be going to take questions from the audience and opening that up.
Well, just know that if somebody comes forward and says, I tried to register, I can't, and it's somebody who really should be there, just know I am out here.
Okay.
Really.
All right.
Jenny, I see that your hand is raised too. Oh, and you're muted.
Sorry, they've been putting a water line on my street since December, and there's a lot of noise today. So I had muted. Jillian, I'm sorry. I know I was on this committee with you, and I've been a little in and out of town, and I haven't really done anything to help you on it. But if there's anything you'd like me to do, I'm happy to do that. And I wondered how the descendant engagement on Tuesday afternoon is working. Are you working with people that have already been identified, or are
Yes.
other people just kind of who might be interested but haven't been part of it yet? Or are we doing any outreach?
Both and. So I sent it out to folks that have come to prior meetings and to organizations as well, and asked them to blast it out to their people. And several people have come forward and identified themselves, folks that have been at prior engagement meetings, which is kind of nice to have a little bit of continuity. But I think, they might be bringing in more people as well. And they're just going to meet with her and talk about commemorative events, just kind of explain what's been going on here for the past several years in Charlottesville. Dr. Bailey works with descendants of the Butler Plantation sale there, and they've been kind of gaining some traction with commemorative events and that sort of thing in the last several years there in Savannah, Georgia. So anyway, I think it'll be nice for both for Dr. Bailey and for local descendants to kind of connect that way. Yeah.
Great. And are you keeping minutes or something of that so that we can somehow put that into our planning?
You know what? I will speak with the descendants themselves and see how they feel about, what kind of space they feel that they need, or if they,
Right.
if they can kind of, I'll talk with them about it first. I want to check in first with them to see what their comfort level is, I guess, with some
Right,
of
yeah,
this.
recording might not be the best thing. But
Right.
somehow to capture the notes and
Yes.
spirit of the meeting so that it
Yeah.
becomes part of the institutional record of this process we're going through.
Absolutely. And, I will, Diane Browntown is one person who's in, and Calvin Jefferson have both said that they're going to be there, and I will contact them and ask them about this. That's a great idea. Yeah, because it's important. Yeah, I also, it's kind of, it's a balance between wanting to give space and also, wanting that to inform the process so that we can go forward for sure. So good point.
And also, as Jenny was saying, if you need extra hands, just worker bees, I think a lot of us would be happy to just even jump in or plan to be there to do X, Y, or Z.
Thanks. Yeah, it might be the library staff that might, so
Yeah.
might need
The
that.
library has been really, really helpful and great to work with. They created the flyer. They're providing, I think, refreshments for afterwards. So they've been a great partner. We had several partners through this, but the library has been especially helpful.
Yeah, I can
Yes.
imagine like helping them set up the room maybe and maybe take down the chairs afterwards. That might be something that could be helpful.
Great.
And I'll just say, and we can continue, Jelaine and Phil, to maybe talk about this through email afterwards. But one thing I want to touch base on before Tuesday, when we planned the lecture with library staff and Tom Chapman and Preservation Piedmont folks a few weeks ago, we were talking about just a very loose run of events for the evening. And I think it makes sense for somebody to get up at the beginning of the lecture before we introduce Ann Bailey, and just give a 30-second to 2-minute kind of introduction about the Historic Resources Committee, introducing ourselves, and just talking about the work being done at Court Square or about Court Square. If need be, I'm happy to give that introduction myself, but I was thinking that Phil or Jelaine, since you've been so active kind of in this project and writing the memo to council, it would make sense for either of you to give that introduction if you'd like.
Okay.
I think Jelaine would be the obvious choice for that.
All right. I'm on.
Great, thank you, Jelaine.
Okay, and let's see, we've already had at a previous meeting, we've had a motion to approve the financial contribution to this. So that's not a thing we need to do. And I guess, are there any other comments about where we are with descendant engagement or the upcoming lecture? And I guess I just had an additional one to ask Jelaine what the expected time frame for Medeja and Jake's work to be sort of whatever they consider done.
Right. So we had a meeting 2 or 3 Fridays ago, I believe it was, again with descendants at the courthouse there in the documents room in the archives there. Medeja Leverett and Jake Calhoun, who are the 2 history graduate students that have been conducting research, presented their work in progress to a group of about half a dozen descendants. And a couple others of us that, from the Memory Project at the Democracy Initiative at UVA, and Andrea Douglas, I believe, was there as well. And so much as they presented to us, a couple of weeks before that at the HRC, kind of to inform the document that Phil sent to City Council, they presented information to the descendants and kind of just showed them some of the sources. Jake and Medeja think that working through the summer and possibly with the addition of another researcher to join them, that they can get through all of those chancery books at least, and of course, Sam Towler's already been through I don't know, is it the wills or the deeds? I can't remember, can't keep everything straight and stuff, but anyway, they're going to try and plow through this summer and see if they can't make it through, at the end of the fall. And then we're also going to need to have discussions about organization and storage and that sort of thing. That's an ongoing conversation. But yeah, at least through the summer and possibly on into next year,
Okay. Yeah, I think in that case, I think we at some point we'll need to have a discussion on where we want to sort of and how we want to schedule submitting a final report to council and how that aligns with whatever stage that they're in. Because if they go into next year, we probably want to set our own deadline instead of it just being whenever they're done. But we can talk about that further because I don't think there's any urgency on getting that report to council, anytime soon. So it's mostly up to us as to when we want to say it's done. Okay. I guess with that, we can move on to the next agenda item, the downtown walking tour map work session. Prior to the meeting, Kay had sent out a couple of documents. I think it was a revised layout, and
it's the old layout.
It is the old layout. It was. I didn't have a device that was big enough to look at it at the time, and so it was. I couldn't actually see.
Although Dee Dee will explain because it is revised slightly. So maybe Dee Dee wants to introduce.
Okay.
We met with
Yeah.
Ann, and and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I'll just hand it over to Dee Dee then.
Okay, well, our biggest accomplishment this last month was meeting with the designer again with the kind of new idea that we'd move a little bit away from broad themes that would encompass kind of our whole geographic region, which is Court Square, Downtown Mall, Water Street, Market Street, and Vinegar Hill, and go more geographic, more concentration on each of those areas, with the exception of probably combining downtown and Water Street, which makes sort of some sense. And the implication of that is really that those panels that we used very generally will get much more site specific. We'll probably further narrow down the actual sites on the map to include only those that not only, I'm going to say that's probably not absolute, but those that we talk about, but that you can actually see. Maybe there are some exceptions to that rule. But that said, generally, we will only talk about sites that are on the map, which means we really have to get really narrowed down. It's very hard when you know an awful lot about local history, or there's just a lot written about it. We very much benefited, as we said last month, from Sterling's tours that he gives, which he gave us his whole scripts, which were really great. They really had that same kind of orientation with a lot more detail. But we talked to the designer about really changing the layout a little bit more to give basically 2 panels each to Court Square, to Market Street, probably 3 to Downtown Mall, and really grouping them. And she said, no, she said, don't do that. Don't do that. So the design, the only thing, and Kay actually, I didn't look to see if you put up the first PDF, or she has altered the design a little bit to move the Vinegar Hill map down so that really does group our geographic areas. I know this is really sort of hard to comprehend, but we're still grappling, and we both had some things kind of get in the way to really working on text, but we're still grappling with what content to include and how to be inclusive. So that said, I'm going to sort of give it back over to Kay, because what she sent you all has a little bit more to do with content. Unless there's questions.
Yes, and I'll say, Richard had also, Richard Wilson, who isn't with us today, had some stuff about architecture. And so we've been trying to find a way to incorporate that in, because we do think that there's an audience of people who like to look at buildings. So we're, it's kind of a mix and match. We're trying to get the history in, and of course the architecture is historical too, but so we're working on that. And so this has some of the things that he wants. There are some things that Anne doesn't want us to do, like when we just have a list to have the year the building was built, but we're putting it in there anyway, and we can negotiate about that later, because we're just trying now to get some of the information. And I think we've done a little bit of cutting in just the rough draft that I sent. What happened is that after we met with Anne, I kind of in the moment thought, okay, I kind of get what she's saying. And I rushed home and tried to, write it in that fashion and then like fill in later. So a lot has not been factored. I mean, there's no totally wrong story here, but there's a lot of facts that haven't been checked. So I'm just saying that, but to sort of give you an idea of what we're doing. And on downtown even, we have cut. So we have like, instead of the 21 sites we began with, we're down to about a third of those dropped out. So we have about 14 sites. So anyway, I think Dee Dee pretty much explained it. And so this write-up is kind of an experiment to see how we can write about it, have the listing, have the maps, and then so people can go to the write-ups that are going to kind of focus on a geography, but tell you a little bit of the story. So that's what we're attempting to do. And it's a work in progress. So any feedback either now or later, Sterling gave us a lot of feedback from the first draft. And so it is helpful. Thank you.
And I'd just like to say that, it sounds like we're just not making much progress, which, and one arena is true, but the map is designed, its layout, we know it. It's really about the text that isn't that we don't have that much text. I mean, we're not, the map doesn't allow for much text. So it's sort of ironic that it's the fact that we have so little room to actually explain things. But that's the piece that we just are thrashing about with. The map is really, other than that, once we get that, we can pop things in and it can go very quickly. But again, and we said this last month, I mean, we're both given freedom by there only being basically two of us, because we don't have to, we don't have to worry about public meeting rules, which are important rules, but at the same time, we're really hampered by that too, because it's just two of us,
Yeah.
and we're really trying to be inclusive, and we keep going back, and I think we'll probably ultimately settle a lot with a lot of the basic text that's already been written by the Historic Resources Committee. And we've said that from the very get-go. And now that we're really saying, okay, we have to narrow down a given site that we're going to be talking about, that enables us better to go back to some of those texts that are basically very good and have been vetted. But just as an example, and at Court Square and Market Street are the sort of easiest ones, because there's just not that many diverse sites. But as an example, I mean, if we want to talk about a number of issues on Court Square, that the taverns and the hotels and in the sale of the enslaved, I mean, Eagle Tavern is a really good spot to do that. So it's really kind of looking that way to say, okay, you're standing here in front of the site of what was Eagle Tavern, and we can tell a pretty broad story just at this site. I don't know if that helps to talk about how we're grappling with sites versus text, but really choosing some sites. And, and as we're doing this, I think we all have to be really, really careful. And I notice this in a lot of the texts that I read, because there's, tour books and, lots of websites and things about what was actually there when we're talking about something. And this goes back a lot to the conversation we have about the sale of the enslaved at Court Square. I think we have to recognize that that building, that courthouse building that we're looking at off Jefferson Street, wasn't built until 1860. So a lot of the things that we're talking about were not on those stairs. They were there, they were on that site, basically, because the original, or at least the second version of the courthouse, is somewhere embedded in there. That's just an example of how I think we have to be a little careful about what we say. Margaret, do you have something? Did you put
Well,
your?
I just had a question, a general question. So if we had any suggestions to the text that Kay just sent us yesterday, the text that you've already prepared, so we should go ahead and send those to you now.
Yes, that would be great. Or, just even any thoughts like, this seems out of place. Put it somewhere. Yeah.
Okay,
that would be
okay.
great. Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, in anybody, and Margaret, you'd be such a great person that as we develop actual text, because we have like 100 words for each, generally speaking, for each site. I mean, it's like a historic marker.
The problem is not creating too many words.
I know, and really it is like writing a historic marker, because that's how many words you get in the highway historic marker. But as we do that, and looking at particularly at this group of folks, it would be great if we could come, sort of one of us come to each, and say, can you just look at this? Can you give us some feedback on this? Again, I think we need to honor, it's very, very important to honor public meeting rules. And we are, as a subcommittee, we are subject to those same restrictions, and we should abide by them. We need to. It's not should, we have to, and we should. So I think we need to be just, a little careful. We're hesitant to come to the whole committee with a whole lot of text before we feel like we're ready enough to get some meaningful whole committee feedback.
And I want to add, especially John has joined us, is we will be looking for good photos. We need really sharp images, because they will be so small. They will be small. If you look at that original map, you see how she's laid it out, but they still can be very effective of any images that people have that they think will be, are particularly good in part of our downtown, larger downtown, including Vinegar Hill area.
And of course, Holsinger will, with his Court Square photos that could come in very handy. And that's another issue. I mean, we talked to the designers, said, well, do we really need these sort of header photos on every panel? We maybe get some more words. She said, yes, you do. she's a good designer, and we're really trying to abide by her experience and expertise, but sometimes it's hard when you really want a little bit more space, and we're trying to find it. But
okay, so I guess the charge to everyone is to look at that text and sort of help shape that text going forward. If you have any comments on it.
Yes, and also, I don't know how to say this in any other way. If you think, oh, I think this whole area should be kind of put in a different context, please tell us that. I mean, we're happy to rewrite and, make a different focus. So, just your thoughts. We're not asking everybody to be on the committee all the time, but to give us your best shot at where we are right now, and then we'll try to work on it some more. And we do, both of us have had different little family issues and other issues in the last 3 weeks. So,
well, and I mean, I know there's been a continual concern over the progress of this, but, I think that we really are trying to do something that is very different than these sort of tours that have been done in the past, or these sort of maps have been done in the past, or brochures. It's something that's very different, and that shouldn't necessarily take a lot more work and effort, because once we get there, it will be something that hopefully will be used for a very long time and will be useful to people and more representative of the area. So it's a very hard,
And
it's a
I
very
would
hard
just
job
like
to do. So
Yeah, I'd just like to say too that, and I credit Kay with this, recognizing early on that to design one of these things is a professional does these things. Wouldn't be a volunteer activity, but at the same time, so is writing text. So I sort of keep coming back to, it's me and Kay, and we're not professionals at this.
Actually, I am a professional.
Oh, Kay is, okay, sorry. I mean, but I'm not talking just
I'm
about
sorry
writing,
to
but,
say.
for brochures and things, but maybe, okay. My bad. But yeah, I think we do need to recognize our,
The
at
limits.
least our numbers limitations. And sorry, Kay.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add in, and this is for John, but to remind the rest of you also that we do hope that we will be able to have a connection to an electronic version that we can go into more detail on some of these stories. And of course, Elizabeth Shiloh, who I think wanted to be on the call today with Beloved Community, is actually working on a civil rights tour. And we have talked about meeting and how we might be able to collaborate on that, so that people who want, they come to Charlottesville and they're just walking around with their maps, they'll be able to do that, but then it'll be a connection. So if you want to know more, that we will have more that you can connect to in the 21st century way, as they say. I'm still in the 20th century myself.
And, the Historical Society is a great partner with that too, because
Yes.
they give tours already. So.
I think the more electronic connection we can have linkages, the better, because it helps people in planning their trips before they ever come to Charlottesville.
Yes.
It helps them in time management, and it lets them have a more cohesive and holistic view of Charlottesville if they can look at all the different aspects.
And as also Jelaine gives tours too of the Court Square and Margaret Street Park. So there's lots of things that are already happening that I think we need to see where partnerships on that digital piece particularly can happen.
In terms of partnerships, I've been in conversation with the new group, the Friends of Downtown Seaville, with Michael Kaplan as the chair, and they just brought in an executive director. I don't think they even announced it, but I think they just hired her. There has been a conversation there about trying to figure out how to do online digital app kind of tours, and it might behoove the HRC to think about trying to see if this committee could facilitate a separate conversation with all the people who have had the same idea, and all the people who want to do or have done or will do or thinking about doing tours, that at least to maybe have a couple working group kind of meetings to say, how can we take what exists and expand upon it, and or narrow it down to tell the stories, and that the map that you're creating is useful for something else, and it's a stepping stone. So I think there's opportunities there where this map could maybe hopefully kind of gather that momentum and kind of get some stuff going.
Good,
Can you tell us, Tom, a little bit more about Friends of Downtown Seaville?
Or
They are the new folks that wrap the Dewberry, and
yeah, they
trying-
sort of came on from the Downtown Business Association.
That's what I wondered.
That
Okay.
organization transitioned to a more generic name that I guess is intended not to specifically pigeonhole them as the business representatives.
So, Tom,
yes,
if you could
the
send us-
business the business association realized the limitations of what they could do from a commercial kind of standpoint and as representing the businesses. So it was very, business oriented and kind of similar to what the VACVB is going through in terms of, if you have too many elected officials involved in the conversation, but not enough hotel and other folks. So the Friends of Downtown Seville is going to be a separate, and they're trying to get their nonprofit status so that they can open up other opportunities there. Since the other was more commercial, this is nonprofit focused. So sorry, Kay.
If you could get us some contact information, because as I said, we're planning to meet with Elizabeth and Shiloh, and she's working on a tour. So we'd be delighted, and we could perhaps all get together, and that would be great. So if you can send us some contact information, we'll follow up.
They have a really great website, Friends of Downtown Seville, that you can look at to determine, how to connect with them. And in April and May, they're starting up some committee structured groups that'll focus on specific areas of downtown, beautification versus business focus versus, events, all these different things. So they're thinking big. It's a matter of seeing how far they go, but at least from my vantage point in terms of tours and thinking that through, trying to, focus a lot of people's energies to facilitate how we can all work together as opposed to reinvent the wheels in multiple different venues. So.
Yeah, I think my only caution there would be that I could see an interest there in not explicitly pointing out who have been the beneficiaries of things like the destruction of Vinegar Hill. I noticing some text from Kay's notes for the map. A group that's primarily focused on the business orientation of the mall probably would not want it pointed out who actually benefited from those actions. So I mean, I think there may be some conflict between what the Friends of the Downtown Mall would like to present the mall and its history as versus a truthful and inclusive history of what has actually happened in that area.
Well, and also,
Let's not start out being divisive. Let's assume that we could work with them so that they would be taking that attitude from the beginning of the real story of Vinegar Hill and Main Street.
yeah, and let me just say, most of them were not here then. So it's not like they have, they were at fault or they're going to feel defensive. So, I agree with Jenny. We'll, but I hear what you're saying, Phil, and we will definitely be cautious about that. I think getting together and seeing where we have common interest, and that'll be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Next up.
Report back.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. Were there any other comments about that agenda item? Okay. Next up was the meeting procedure discussion. I had brought this up at the last meeting, and that was the other HRC, the Human Rights Commission. Yeah, sorry. It's hard to remember which ones they are. They had or are still using a less formal set of meeting rules that's known as Martha's Rules of Order. And one of the sort of key tenets of that is instead of having a formal motion second and then discussion and vote, for things that are mostly well agreed upon or perfunctory, somebody simply proposes it, and then there's a system of thumbs up, thumbs to the side, or thumbs down. And if everyone is either in favor of it, is okay with it, or then it just automatically passes, and there doesn't need to be a whole lot of discussion on it. We don't have a whole lot of items that we actually do that, but it would help the initial part of the meeting to move a little faster if we just did the agenda and the meeting notes in that way, so that we could just sort of say, here's the agenda, here's the meeting notes, and then move on to the bulk of the meeting instead of having the sort of votes that we have. I don't know if there's any interest in moving to that sort of mechanism, but I wanted to bring that up as something that we could possibly do.
Phil, from my standpoint, would I guess as meeting recorder, would I kind of record, who has the thumbs, the neutral, the up and the down? I mean, would that still be pretty explicitly recorded?
I actually don't know with it whether I think it's just a majority of okay or yes, and then that gets recorded as the outcome of it. Kay?
We just say, here's the meeting agenda. Does anyone have any comments or want any changes? If not, we just move forward. I mean,
Yeah, I think that would
no,
be,
why would we need a vote? I don't see why we would need a vote.
yeah, that would be fine with me.
I mean, we
Also.
publish the agenda and it's out there, and then if, and we have the meeting notes. So if anybody says, well, we're not discussing blah, blah, and let's do it today, and we say, okay, or we say, no, we don't want to, it'll be in the meeting notes. So I would just suggest if we can just do it simply by, if anybody has anything, I think we're a small enough group that, and no one's that shy. I think everybody would speak up and tell you if they had strong objections, either there or the corrections we make on the minutes, and just, I don't see why we need to take a vote on either one, frankly, if we
Okay.
give people an opportunity. And then if there is some contentious thing, we will take a vote, And it's.
Yeah,
really
I think that's,
discretion,
yeah, I think that's the intention of the thumbs up, thumbs to the side, is that it's sort of short circuiting that and just sort of having a formal, does anybody have any real strong objections? If not, let's go ahead, without forcing the chair to sort of be like, oh, I think that was a strong objection, or I don't, or how long should we have this go on? But
I'm being a little bit wonky today. Sorry about that. I guess I've just spent too much of my adult life in committees and boards and commissions and so forth. When I'm trying to deal with my screen and raise my hand or something, sometimes it's a little bit clunky. So just the process of looking for where's the sideways thumb is boggling my mind at the moment. I have no objection to it, and I've always felt constrained by Robert's rules, but we are a city created entity. So the structural part of me is saying, if we're going to do something where we're recommending something to council, or if we're going to suggest spending money, it seems like it's better to have a motion and a recorded vote, because it's part of a legal process and we live in a sort of litigious community and society. So it seems like we'd be taking this committee off in a way that I'm not aware other city committees are doing. So I'd like us to stay in line with what
I would say that
all the groups are doing.
Yeah, I would say that for anything where we're approving expenditure or actually making a formal recommendation to council, those would still go through the same motion, second, discussion, vote, Robert's process.
Yeah.
It would just be the more informal or perfunctory things like the agenda and the meeting notes that would go through this sort of streamlined.
Yeah, it's more consensus.
I object to the meeting notes. I use minutes in historic research. So I think meeting notes can perhaps, I don't know if it has to go through a whole motion second, but there should be a quorum and there should be an approval, some sort of indication of approval, because minutes are often altered. And anyway, that's the only piece that makes me a little nervous about putting to the general. Yeah, sure.
Okay. It doesn't take that much time to do, so we can just continue to do the approvals that we've been doing. Just everybody be ready to make a motion and second the motion when we're when we're doing that. And we can just move on really quickly from that.
Or you could do informal Robert's rules, that don't require a second. there's just a motion and informal Robert's rules, and then you ask for any objections or, something like that. That would maybe streamline the process.
That'd be
By
fine.
the way, city council does not approve the agenda. It just gets set up. Maybe they've started approving the agenda, but when I was on city council for 8 years, we never, the mayor and the city manager came up with the agenda and it was there and you just.
Yeah, this is something that's kind of started in the last couple of years. I don't know, maybe it came with one of our many city managers. I don't know.
Okay. I don't think we had any clear consensus on that, so let's just continue to do it the way we've been doing it, and we can revisit this at a later time if we need to. Okay. Next up is staff updates. So Robert or Jeff.
I don't necessarily have any new staff updates to offer. There are 5 different projects being reviewed at the Board of Architectural Review this month in a few weeks, and we're just starting to process those applications. Jeff, do you have any updates you'd like to share?
I think the only thing I would put out there, because might need some historic preservation assistance. The city county courts expansion at the Levy Opera House side. The BAR had recommended a phase 1 archaeological survey. And the county has informed me that that's they won't be able to do that. It's not in their scope of work and budget. So couple ways to, I'll say it openly, I guess I'd like to, sort of almost apply some pressure and say, there's the right thing to do, and to take a look at this landscape is the right thing to do. But the other option might be to evaluate some way of doing it ourselves if push comes to shove, and we think it's something important to be done. I'm waiting to hear back from Ben Ford on a sort of an estimate on what that would take. So I don't really have anything more to share. It's just disappointing, obviously, but there's no enforcement necessarily that we have. But just wanted to share that with you all, and so that and when you hear about it, as it sort of that discussion gets out there, if you have any questions, let me know.
It's just it's a piece of land that's never really been built on in the center of the city. It's a public landscape, and this will be our last chance to do archaeology, to investigate this landscape. So it would be really great if we could do this project, do some sort of survey before the land is built on.
What would that look like from the committee? What options would we have for that?
At this point, I don't have anything concrete. I as I said, I wanted to get it kind of out into the conversation. There might be maybe we need to make requests to the county that they do it. Maybe, I don't know, like Preservation Piedmont, others, I don't know, Historical Society. Maybe we need to sort of express an interest in doing it, or you all put it out there. And I can share, I think we had talked about this last summer. I circulated what we had put in the staff report about it. For one, there's strong evidence that Jack Jewett's father is probably still interred in the ground behind the current Redlands Club. But the information we have is that while that site been paved, this is where there is not a building now. Where it's currently paved has been generally undisturbed since that was laid out on the city plan as the city battery. So there's possibility of at least some information that might be available on the ground there. But I said, if they don't want to do it or refuse to do it, we can politely ask, or I can certainly talk. Well, I plan to talk to Ben, and might be something that we think the city should consider doing. So I kind of to be updated, to be continued, but I did want to get that out there that discussion is going to be coming.
It would be a best practice for this as well as other projects. And Charlottesville doesn't have a city archaeologist and has always been averse to having any sort of archaeological requirements in its ordinance. So this is kind of a baby step, but because it's a public project, it seems
Right.
that it would be a good opportunity to do it. And then I would certainly like to see us go in that vein as we're heading into an era probably of increased redevelopment.
Mhm.
To have a sort of phase one archaeological assessment of the city core, because we've missed out on a lot of information previously. And this is kind of our last chance gasp attempt to maybe find out something.
It's and it's in our comp plan, the city's comp plan, that, you know, when the opportunities on city-owned properties or publicly owned
Yeah.
properties. And actually, I've been thinking about it, and Ben's been out of town, but I want to ask him, and maybe I float it to you all, is the area there, the park where McKee Block was located. Having learned a lot about what GPR can and can't do and other things, I've been wondering how disturbed that site. I mean, we know it's been built up, but that doesn't mean that what was there, at least the remnants of the footprints, no longer exist. So I've been wanting to talk to Ben about what would it take, you know, sort of what kind of things. So I don't know. I'll get back with you all on that, because yeah, Jenny, as you said, we've got and even at the Market Street Park there is relatively undisturbed. There was a house there, I think a few outbuildings, and it was acquired by the city. They were removed, and the park was put in place. So we have some interesting opportunities, and but I'll get some numbers and some ideas. We can talk about them.
Well, and it seems to me there are ways that, you know, if we were to start to make this part of our program and part of our intention, there would be perhaps in the future opportunities where you could put on your other hat and suggest conditions for SUPs, or be able to make developers more aware of opportunities so that they might offer proffers when they're doing extensive redevelopment projects. I mean, I'd like to see this have some utility and transferability to other situations that we know are coming down the pike.
Okay, I see your hands.
Javier. Okay, did you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say there's a precedent that the city and the county both had an archaeological study done at the Lewis and Clark site when the Lewis and Clark Center was being built in Dardantow Park. They both agreed to it. Ben Ford, I believe, was the one who did it. And I for one, would feel like we ought to just request that. You know, write it. Also let the other organizations, as Jeff said, know about it, because I think many other organizations would be interested in that. But there is a precedent already, and I think we should go ahead and say, you know, we think this is another significant site, and something is upcoming, and we want you to consider it. I mean, I don't think it hurts to start.
Yeah, they've agreed to do it. You know, looking back on prior work at the court building, the original building on that block, there's 2 other times that they've agreed to do archaeology. Now that was sort of some minor work, but either way, okay, that's exactly what I think might be necessary. Maybe I'm wearing my advocacy hat here, not my city staff hat, but it is that It may take more than, the BAR. The BAR did express a request. We're having discussions with legal about what we can require as far as conditions go. So that's why it was presented as a request. But I think that it's, preservation organizations could probably maybe express the importance of it. So I would hope, hopefully I'll have some more information to share. I'll be bringing it up with the BAR at the April 19th meeting. The reason being is they need to extend the demolition approval for the Levy Annex. Normally we can review that with the neighborhood developer director, but I'm this time I take it to the BAR. They may wish to say something about it. So I said in the next week or two, you'll be hearing more about it. Fun stuff. Hey, with that in mind, and Jenny, what you just said, I mean, would it help if we sent all of you maybe we should do that, Robert, just send out the BAR agenda, and, if something, says, oh, hey, something about that site, maybe there's something we're not aware of, we should take a look at. I don't know. I always encourage you all to let us know when things are coming up. If there is something that we can insert in the staff report, something we can ask for, we're all ears. That'd be great.
Well, certainly when you're dealing with properties like recently Preston Place, which and now Wharton Baker House. I mean, these are among the oldest properties in the city that were originally part of farms or plantations, had an agricultural past, people were enslaved there. I mean, there are a lot of things that might be interesting at those sites, and we're losing that opportunity. Then others, as we get closer to the downtown core, have been under parking lots for decades. And
Right.
Sometimes those were very disturbed before they were paved, and other times maybe not. So that's why I say, if you have some CLG money or something, it might be worth talking, using that to do an overview archaeological study of the city, of where we get the biggest bang for our bucks, what would be likely to still be able to reveal information, and what would be likely to be so disturbed it wouldn't be worth doing it. I'm not an archaeologist, so I don't know, but I've worked with enough over my career to say, I think we're at that point where that would be really good information to have.
Yeah, and one of the things I've read, LIDAR, this LIDAR you read all the time about like what extraordinary, information it provides depending upon the level of the evaluation. So that's also on my list to talk to Ben about, like, well, what exactly, I keep hearing, well, the city has a LIDAR there and it's GIS, but I haven't seen it. Or, is there something that can be done on a smaller scale that, I don't know, some guy with a drone for a couple hours can provide. This is sort of learning more, like you said, Jenny, what's the technology allow, and maybe working with Ben to just say, that's a very good way to think of it. A good archaeological survey plan for the city, opportunity sites. I know the county did one, back in the 70s. I'm not sure they refer to it much, but we certainly could use one here. Okay. That's all I had.
I think it might be worth exploring too, and Jeff, I don't know if you're asking this, is whether the HRC wants to write a letter to whomever. I'm not clear at this point who has the authority to do anything, but at least as individuals, I assume, not on behalf of the HRC, obviously. But
so that, yeah, it's politically there's, well, we all know what's going on. I mean, parking lots and parking garages and court buildings, et cetera. So nobody wants to, I certainly don't want at the staff level to be banging the pots and pans together in an inappropriate way. But reporting to you all as the Historic Resources Committee, letting you all know what's happened. And yes, it would be nice. In fact, we had brought up archaeology also at the Preston Place as one of the recommendations. But it would be nice if these could be conditions that, where, when appropriate, the BAR could say, no, you must, as a matter of the COA. And if you don't like that, then appeal it to city council. But yes, I would say that encouraging the county to reconsider its position on this evaluation, it can't be more than, I don't know, what do you think, Tom? $5,000 or $6,000, $7,000. I mean, there's not a lot of land there to look at. So this is not, I don't know, in the grand scheme of things, but it would be helpful, yes, if you all and Preservation Piedmont and the Historical Society, and I can circulate the email that I received, if that would be helpful.
So this is up to the county.
So my understanding, well, not my understanding, so that the city and county broke this up in a way that the city said, we're going to do X, Y, Z, and we're putting X amount of money towards this courts expansion. The balance is the responsibility of the county, and they are managing the project. So there's, I don't know that the decision hierarchy, but it appears that they're sort of, the city's given what it's going to give. So if this is anything additional, then it would be the county's responsibility, and they're saying this appears to be additional in their opinion.
Who owns the land?
City and the county.
Oh, jointly.
It's
Oh.
Yes,
exactly,
yeah.
it's exactly like Darden Towel.
Yep.
So I'm just saying, we could easily say something general. We don't have to get into all of the details of who pays what. The county manages Darden Towel Park, but the county and the city get together and talk about it. So, it's in the county budget, but there's some financial back and forth. So I really think, there's precedent for us just taking a policy thing. This is important. If we've got an opportunity to explore our history deeper, to look at I would be all for our, send us some stuff, Jeff, but maybe at our next meeting, we could just write a general letter. We don't have to be archaeologists. We don't have to be planning commissioners. We're just a committee that cares about our history and how to preserve.
Hey, would you like to write that letter and we can put that?
I'll draft a letter.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you, Phil, and then.
Yeah.
you can-
Okay, and we can put that on the agenda for our next meeting. Robert.
And I guess the fallback is, we can discuss this at a later date, but if there's just simply a no, we're not going to do it, then the question becomes, is that?
Worry about that later.
Yeah.
You can't.
I wish I could. I don't know, but
Well,
you're
yeah, you have a
absolutely right.
different job than
Yeah.
me.
You're right.
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
need to make it clear, we're not trying to hold anything up, we're not trying to stop
No.
anything. This
Right.
is just an opportunity to
Yeah.
see if this site can reveal any information when it's going to be disturbed.
I'll send out to you all the staff report, BAR's action, and the note from the county, and that way you can have that. Thank you all.
And obviously, any information we have from Ben Ford would be invaluable.
So, yeah, and so Ben has we have a contract with him, sort of ongoing, sort of on-call. He's our on-call archaeologist, so I can ask him questions like this. So I'm not stepping out of bounds by saying, hey, how much did you say this was going to cost? I can say, how much would this cost? So.
Okay, sounds good. Let's, so we already started talking about the agenda for the next meeting. We have that item on it. Something Jeff brought up last week was doing something with better marking the area around the cemetery in Penn Park. Right now, I believe it's a rope cordon, and possibly putting up a sign of some sort. So we could put something on the agenda to discuss whether a temporary sign of some sort could be put up. There's quite a lot of descendant engagement that still needs to be done, but we do have a good contact point in Steve Waller there, and possibly encouraging him to start a more formal descendant group with members of his family who could, either approve of or push for marking or whatever development of that site as a historical site should be done. But for now, it's not marked at all. Just having something as simple as, well, we can discuss this at the next meeting. We'll just put an agenda item to discuss next steps with the Penn Park.
There were several descendants of the Waller descendants at the CVHR meeting yesterday.
One
Yeah,
more
I
thing
think
I
there's-
missed. Sorry, how'd that go? Was that,
It was,
That-
it was great. It was great. It was a lot of detail, but there was really good participation. I'm sure Steve was called out, but there was quite, I don't want to exaggerate, but, and I should know a number, but there were several, more than 2 or 3 descendants in the meeting. It was great. It was good discussion.
Good.
And it was recorded. It was recorded, so it'll go out for anybody.
oh, fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Any other agenda items for the next meeting? No? Okay. Next on to announcements, upcoming events, lectures, research, or anything else that may be of interest to the HRC. Yes, Kate.
Well, I hope it's of interest to the HRC. There is this Sunday at 3 o'clock in the Ting Pavilion, a community celebration in person it's the second part of our Martin Luther King Jr. Community celebration. And this year we're having 3 speakers, Brenda Brown Grooms, Alvin Edwards, and Rabbi Tom Goodrich. And our question is about the issue they will be addressing is the urgency of creating a beloved community in Charlottesville. Jonathan Spivey will lead a small but very excited group of choir people who will be singing in person. And there will be an award given to the community. We've been doing this for 37 years in Charlottesville. And not every year have we given an award, but this year there will be an award given to a pair of people who have contributed to the community in the spirit of Dr. King. And we also are cognizant that, we're usually having this around the time of the anniversary of his birth. And this is a week or so later from the anniversary of his death. But I think it'll be a wonderful event. There'll be a student reading their essay. So it'll be intergenerational. It will begin at 3 and it will be over at 4:30 because the Ting Pavilion has 2 more events for the rest of the day. So I hope as many of you as can will come. We think it'll be a great event and really an exciting event. Thanks.
Can you repeat the time, day and time?
3 o'clock on Sunday in the Ting Pavilion. And you can wear a mask, but we think we'll have enough space for everybody. And
Great, thank you, Kate.
Mhm.
Any others? Yes.
I just want to say a couple of things about the Halsinger Portrait Project. As you know that we've got exhibitions planned at UVA for September at the Jefferson School in early 23. We're going to have extensive community engagement program. We know that accessing UVA is difficult, and we also know that many people don't want to access UVA. So we're going to be taking this exhibition to churches and to schools and to community organizations. We're going to give them an exhibition in a box, and they can have a mini exhibition of their own. We're in the process of changing our name from the Halsinger Portrait Project to the Halsinger Studio Portrait Project, because we have discovered that Rufus Halsinger, the owner of the studio, didn't make all of the portraits that we're going to be showing. And in fact, he probably made only a few of the portraits that we're going to be showing. It was a big operation. He employed retouchers and retail people and darkroom assistants, and he also employed photographers. And it was no secret, he mentioned this in his ads, that I've just hired so-and-so who's a brilliant portrait photographer. He's coming to us from North Carolina. So it was no secret at the time that Rufus Halsinger did not make all the portraits. So we're highlighting the studio in the name change, and that takes the emphasis off of the person, right? Because this exhibition is about the sitters in the portraits. It's not about Rufus Halsinger. It's these, we know that we are standing on the shoulders of so much great work that has been done, looking at the history of the city. And this goes way back to the 20th century, the late 20th century, where you had things like the front porch interviews that were interviewing people who had been alive at the time of the Halsinger studio was flourishing, alive in the teens and the 20s, and show up, some of them, in the portraits. So, and you're all aware of the work that Scott French and Reginald Butler did at the Woodson Institute in the late 20th century. Very much aware of what's going on now with this committee, with the things that's going on at the Jefferson School. There's just so much great work that's been done. We're the beneficiaries of that. A lot of that work, though, has been about the oppression, right? It's been about Jim Crow. It's been about lynchings. It's been about the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. And it's been about the construction of those monuments to white supremacy that were part and parcel of a very oppressive atmosphere. But that's background in this exhibition. This exhibition begins with what you see in the pictures. And what you see in these portraits is beauty. What you see is style. What you see is dignity. What you see are people building a community, creating families, establishing businesses, running their churches. There was an immense amount of creativity in the Black community in this period being the first 2.5 decades of the 20th century. Despite all the oppression, despite what could be called an atmosphere of terror, when you think about the lynching of John Henry James, the lynching of the 14-year-old boy on the Nelson County, Albemarle County line in 1904, the attempted lynching in 1917, the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, this was an atmosphere of racial terror, but you don't see it in these portraits. What you see are people who are not being defined by what white folks are doing to them, right? And it's that we're getting at, right? We will, of course, talk a little bit about oppression. You can't leave it out because that's the atmosphere. But that's not what's going to be highlighted here in this exhibition. It's about the creativity of the African American community in the first 2.5 decades of the last century.
Phil, you're muted.
I'm muted. Yeah, I just realized that. Thank you, John. I'm personally very excited about those exhibitions. Does anybody else have any announcements? Okay, seeing none, I'll call this meeting of the Historic Resources Committee adjourned.
Have a good
Thank you
weekend,
so much.
everyone.
Great night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.